In a world where trust is sacred and intimacy is cherished, we are going to explore the dark side of why dismissive avoidants cheat in relationships. We'll cover what leads up to this experience, how to prevent it from happening, and what to do if this is something you've already experienced happen to you. Now, I do want to say, just like I say with other videos, it is not just avoidant attachment styles that cheat. In fact, many avoidant attachment styles can be very loyal to their partners and take a much longer time to develop feelings for other people, especially outside of a relationship. But of course, this can happen with any attachment style at any time. So we're going to uncover exactly why this tends to happen and what you can do. So, first and foremost, I think it's really important to recognize that a lot of people, when they get cheated on in relationships, they suffer more than is necessary because they really personalize the experience. And the reality is that most people cheat not because of the person that's being cheated on. Most people are not cheating because of their partner not being good enough or not being lovable or worthy. All these types of stories that the person who gets cheated on makes it mean about themselves and really personalizes through that context. The vast, vast majority of the time that people cheat are because of two underlying sort of principles. One is that there are issues that the person who is doing the cheating has not dealt with about relationships. And two is that there are issues within the relationship dynamic that are not being solved for. And that's really a two-way street. That's a collaboration between both parties. There really aren't cases where it's just because of the other person not being good enough or not being something enough that that person gets cheated on. Because if it wasn't working, if there was an incompatibility or there wasn't something working with that person, the person wouldn't cheat. They would leave a relationship that's not working. So I think it's important just to note before we even dive into root cause here that if you're somebody who's been cheated on or recently found out that you're cheated on, it's not about you not being something enough. It's not about you not being interesting enough or attractive enough or funny enough. It's about that the person who did the cheating has unresolved issues. And probably on top of that, the collaboration and compatibility between the two of you had some unresolved issues. It's never like one person's fault who's receiving the infidelity. So I just wanted to say that for a lot of people that I've seen over the years who really take it to heart and really take it into their future relationships and make it mean that, oh my gosh, I'm always going to get cheated on because I'm not worthy or I'm not this enough or that enough. And really it couldn't be further from the truth. So besides that, as we go into root causes, one of the biggest things, so we're going to put this into two major principles. We're going to put the principle of the person with their own unresolved stuff. And in this case, we're talking about dismissive avoidance. And then in the next part of this video, we're going to talk about the relationship's unresolved stuff. And then we'll talk about what to do. So for the dismissive avoidant, when they have their unresolved stuff, there are a lot of things that happen that cause the dismissive avoidant to sabotage intimacy, to sabotage closeness. And this is because of these subconscious associations and beliefs they derive from their childhood experiences. In other words, if you grow up in a household where there is neglect, where your needs are not met, where you don't feel seen and supported as a unique individual, where you don't feel accepted for who you are, and you don't feel safe in the emotional connection between yourself and your caregiver, basically the repetition and emotion of repeatedly being exposed to that programs your subconscious mind. And it programs your subconscious mind with all of these concepts and ideas about love, about connection, about care, about emotional intimacy. And so if you get programmed to believe that a lot of these things, when you get really vulnerable or when you're really reliant on somebody, because as a child, when you get this conditioning, you're really reliant on your caregivers, whether you like it or not. If you come to believe that that type of reliance, that type of vulnerability to somebody only is met with negative outcomes or is met with significantly more negative outcomes and feelings than positive ones, then you don't feel good about that. And you come to believe that as soon as you deeply connect and become vulnerable to somebody, that you're going to relive your subconscious mind. Part of its function is to like reproject old situations and to sort of remind you of the past and let you know it's not quite so simple, but your subconscious mind stores all these past experiences, and then that acts as the filter you see and interact with the world through. And so if you had these painful experiences, it essentially is programmed to assume those painful experiences onto your future. And so what takes place is when you start becoming vulnerable, when you start becoming connected, when you start opening up to somebody and falling for them, well, as a dismissive avoidant, when that happens, you start having all these fears come up, all these negative associations get fired. They start triggering, like, oh, I'm going to get neglected, or I'm going to be shamed, or I'm not going to feel emotionally safe. It's going to lead to negative outcomes. And so all of those associations come online, and no wonder you sabotage intimacy. And sometimes cheating is one common way that this will happen. Now, there are other situations, right? For dismissive avoidance, there can be lots of forms of why somebody cheats, right? There can be a lot of these painful associations. And so as a result, the dismissive avoidance says, okay, I'm going to sabotage intimacy. I'm going to push this person away because they're scared of all the potential future things that are going to happen that their past experiences are reminding them of. But there's a lot more than just that as core reasons, because of course, as we know, not all dismissive avoidance cheat in relationships, although it can be something that does happen. The second major thing that can happen quite frequently is dismissive avoidance believe that they can't have deep connection and loving connection and have their freedom and their independence at the same time. Now, in rare cases, dismissive avoidance come across relationships that seem to really foster that for them. And so they may not have those beliefs triggered, but the vast majority of dismissive avoidance, particularly the ones that I've been in couple sessions with over and over again for, many different people over the years, a lot of them would come to me and say, well, I kept being more scared that the more deeply I connected, the more deeply I invested, the more I was giving up or giving away my freedom, my independence, my autonomy, my ability to do what I wanted. And so the more that that feels fostered, I mean, cheating can often be a form of sabotage. If we're just looking at it realistically, when you're investing in something and then you're cheating on that same thing that you're investing in, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? You're like, it's like you're putting your energy into something and sabotaging it at the same time, right? It doesn't make any logical sense. So there's obviously these subconscious reasons that these things are taking place. And so dismissive avoidance may try to carve out domain for themselves by pushing the other partner away. And in essence, they push that partner away because they are literally trying to maintain their sense of freedom and independence and autonomy. And so when we look at this, these can be other subconscious root causes that can create um, the sort of foundation or breeding grounds for why somebody may be likely to cheat. Now, there's more to it, of course, right? We're going to keep going to the other parts here. There's about a couple other personal things in here for dismissives, and then we'll talk about the relationship dynamic. But when somebody already has these deep fears of intimacy and deep fears of closeness, they start to try, the subconscious mind starts to push it away and sabotage it. And if somebody doesn't give a good reason for somebody to do that, the person's going to intrinsically sabotage it on their own, which of course can be through cheating, right? Can be, okay, well, if I flaw find with my partner, if I create a lot of space between myself and them, or if I convince myself, I can't tell you how many dismissive avoidance said to me over the years, like I was trying to convince myself I didn't need this person. I was trying to convince myself that I didn't need to be close to them. I felt overwhelmed by my own feelings. They scared me. It didn't feel good. I didn't feel safe. And so I pushed away. So we can see a lot of these, like, sort of unilateral reasons for this as well. There's a specific breed of situation, we'll say. And I find this to be actually less commonly dismissive avoidance, although it can be, where people can suffer with sex addiction, right? And in that case, sex addiction is usually a huge void of significance and the ability to achieve intimacy emotionally. And so because somebody's not as emotionally developed, they may be like intellectually developed, but they'll try to meet their needs to feel wanted, significant, important, valued. And then also if they have a high need for like novelty, and if they really get a lot of those needs met through sex, right? And if they're starving for intimacy as a whole and they can't achieve it emotionally, well, then some people will actually try to get that level and depth of intimacy through sex, because sex at the end of the day is also vulnerable, right? Like it's raw and it's intimate and there's a sense of vulnerability in it. And so sometimes people who struggle with sex addiction, which again, I'm not saying is all dismissive avoidance, but they can they can be dismissive avoidance. And sometimes we'll see that kind of person just again sabotage relationships unilaterally, because even if they had the most perfect partner who did all the things that they possibly could need from a partner in a relationship, if they haven't healed these wounds within themselves, if they haven't filled these voids within themselves that are causing them to starve for these things, then we're going to see that manifestation take place, right? So those are some of the unilateral reasons that avoidance will cheat. And again, I would say the percent of dismissive avoidants who struggle with sex addiction is probably like 5%, like relatively low in the grand scheme of things, but it's worth mentioning because it can be another reason that dismissive avoidants will unilaterally cheat. Now, what are some of the relationship dynamics between two parties? Well, another big thing that can happen here, right, is that if there's miscommunication around needs, what I often find to be the path that leads all individuals to cheating is if somebody has deeply unmet needs combined with those core wounds and fears where they're like assuming negative outcomes about the future of the relationship. So if they've got these, fears and they're trying to sabotage, plus if they have unmet needs in the relationship, and they don't feel like those needs are going to get met, eventually over time they get frustrated and then resentful, and then it can be easy to justify cheating in a relationship dynamic. And so this can be because in this case a dismissive avoidant doesn't know their needs and thus can't express what their needs are to their partner very effectively. This can also be because in this case in particular, you may see, for example, that there's just a miscommunication happening, right? That one person communicates, they try to communicate their needs, it's just not landing, or the other person doesn't have room to meet their needs, and there's a compatibility issue there, perhaps. And so over time, if one partner feels very starved of their needs from their romantic partner, they can then, start justifying, feel resentful, that unmet need, the resentment starts to boil down, and then we have to have this third major ingredient. Okay, so we've got the internal experience, we've got the relationship experience between two parties, and then the third ingredient is often that somebody comes into this person's life or experience that is the representation of the unmet needs with their partner. In other words, let's say that you are dating somebody who's a dismissive avoidant, or you're the loved one of a dismissive avoidant, because that's probably mostly who's watching this video. um, and let's say that you are, so let's say you're dating the dismissive avoidant, and let's say for whatever reason, the dismissive avoidant really needs to feel unconditionally accepted, or at least a greater sense of acceptance. But you don't know that because they may not be communicating that. And they don't know that because it's just this feeling that they have that they're looking for, but they don't know how to articulate that because they're not really exploring themselves or in relationship to themselves. So you have this unmet need. They've already got the fears about future and commitment, and it leading to negative outcomes and being shamed and being unsafe emotionally and because of their childhood, right? And so let's say they've got all these ingredients, right? They've got the fears about the relationship, they've got the unmet need for unconditional acceptance or more unconditional acceptance. And let's say they're not communicating it, so you don't realize that they need that. And maybe you're trying to give that in different ways, but maybe you're feeling frustrated by certain parts of the relationship. And so you're communicating in a way that can sometimes come across as critical. And so it makes them feel the absence of that unconditional acceptance. Then it can be as small of a deal as some coworker at the dismissive avoidance workplace. When the dismissive avoidant makes a mistake, that coworker is like, hey, we all make mistakes. It's not a big deal. It's okay. And just something that small can land, because you have to remember that when we have these deep unmet needs from childhood, on some level, subconsciously, we starve for them. We hunger for them. And on top of that, the mind is a needs meeting machine. So on top of that, the mind is going to literally take you down this rabbit hole of, as soon as it sees this hope for getting that need met, it tries to super attach to it. It hungers for it. It fantasizes. It thinks. It focuses. It ruminates about it, especially if we're really starving for something. And so, in this case in particular, what you may see is that somebody represents that unconditional acceptance, even if it's just in one moment, even if that person's not even unconditionally accepting. And then we actually have the context or foundation for limerence to take place. In other words, this like extreme infatuation, which then, because the mind is wired to get its needs met, is going to basically tempt the person to want to invest in something romantic, because the closer we get to the person who represents the need, the subconscious mind assumes the closer we get to the need itself. And so when you start understanding and unpacking this, you'll start seeing that like it's rarely anything to do with the other person. There may be a need that the person's not meeting, but they're not supposed to mind read, and nobody's going to meet somebody's needs all the time, 24/7 in a relationship. But in fact, it's much deeper than that. It's the childhood foundation that builds the programming and the negative associations about relationships, the unmet needs, the lack of the ability for the dismissive avoidant to communicate those needs because they're not connected to themselves a lot of the time and don't know those needs themselves. Then it's the partner not meeting the need. And then it's somebody coming around that represents that need. And so these are the major reasons that these things take place. And when broken down this way, I think it's really important if you're on the receiving end of this to see, hey, there's a lot deeper stuff here that's really going on from childhood, from individual programming, from communication patterns in the relationship, from how much one person knows themselves, that may have a lot less to do with me. So, if you are the dismissive avoidant, these are definitely huge things to look into. Like if you ever have a pattern or history of cheating, don't shame yourself. There's no good that ever comes from shaming ourselves for things. We have to replace self-shaming with curiosity, with inquisitiveness into ourselves. Like we want to inquire, like, well, what are my patterns? Why do I do this? What comes up for me? What are those unmet needs that I hunger for? What are those fears I have that cause me to sabotage relationships? And if you can articulate those things and work through them, it's actually not just going to make strides in terms of the ability to commit to a healthy relationship when you find the right person, but it's also going to make huge strides for you in the relationship to yourself and your own healing. So that's it for today. If you want to do a much deeper dive into rebuilding trust after cheating, and I don't necessarily mean in the person that you're in a relationship with, but in just so that you're not taking any trust wounds into future relationships, or if you're really rebuilding self trust as a dismissive avoidant, you can check out our course called Rebuilding Broken Trust. And I'll put the link in the description box below. It's a really in depth course for anybody who has past trust wounds that wants to heal them, that wants to just reprogram their relationship to trust as a whole, or really wants to reprogram self trust through inner exploration and ending any cycles of not knowing ourselves or gaslighting ourselves or kind of repressing what we're feeling, and really get into taking a massive stride forward if we did struggle with trust wounds or anything like that from the past, be it a relationship, be it childhood, or whatever form that might have taken. I just wanted to jump in here and let you know that we are doing a 14-day free trial to the All Access Membership Pass at PDS, which means you get access to literally everything inside of the school. And this includes the 4 live webinars I do with our students every single week. And on top of that, you get access to all of our different courses. We have over 55 different courses on relationships, communication, boundaries, emotional mastery, guilt and shame, learning your needs, so many different facets that are really important to master our lives and feel really good about our lives going forward. And last but not least, there's a daily community event. We have trained facilitators and coaches who are in there doing that work, showing up to support you on your journey every single day. Please join me on the other side. Come check it out. See if it's a fit for you. I'd love to see you there. Go ahead and sign up by clicking the link in the description box below. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. If you are enjoying this channel, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, so you don't miss any of the daily videos I put out. And that's it for today, and can't wait to see you in future videos.